Welcome to the Clown Spirit podcast, where we take a deep dive into the world of clowning in all its beauty, possibility, and challenge. I am Barnaby King, founder of Clown Spirit, and I'm so pleased you joined us today because clowning is my passion and my joy, and this podcast is where I get to share that with the world. Before we get into today's episode, I hope you won't mind me taking a moment to share with you about something that's really close to my heart, Clown Spirit Village. Did you know that Clown Spirit Village is the #1 online resource for clowns and the clown curious? It is a veritable funhouse of tools, resources, and support systems that help you bring clowning into your life, grow as a clown, and find your own pathway to success and fulfillment in the clowning world. This is not some automated virtual platform that you must navigate alone. This is a community run for clowns by clowns. And as soon as you join, we take you by the hand and make sure that you are getting what you need. We have regular group coaching sessions where you not only receive feedback and advice, but also just connect with the community. We have workshops and masterclasses with the very best teachers from around the world. People like Hilary Chaplin, Jeff Johnson, Eric Davis, Misha Usoff, Holly Stoppett, just to name a few. You get access to the entire archive of Clown Virgins, our groundbreaking online clowning conference. Countless other resources, including the 3 flagship courses from Clown Spirit. Maybe you're desperate to learn how to clown and you just don't know where to start. Or maybe you've been clowning for years and you want to really maximize your potential, take it to the next level. Clown Spirit Village has it all. And at different pricing levels that make it affordable for everyone. I know we'll have something for you that will make a difference in your clown life. And most importantly, make a difference in the world. Because you joining supports our bigger mission of unleashing as many clowns into the world as possible. Which, let's face it, is exactly what we need right now. Thanks for listening and enjoy today's podcast episode.
Welcome to the Clown Spirit Podcast. And here's your clowntastic host, Mr. Barnaby King.
I was talking recently with a member of the Clown Spirit Village, and they asked me this really fantastic question. They said, how do I know I'm doing a good job as a clown? Now, this person is very new to clowning. They're just discovering their way and feel very trepidatious and unsure about whether they can even call themselves a clown. And of course, I'm trying to encourage them to think of themselves as a clown, because I think in a way that's the first step, is to think of yourself as a clown. But then he posed this question to me: how do I know I'm doing a good job as a clown? And I have to admit, it really stopped me in my tracks and got me thinking. And I'm so grateful to him for posing this question, because I think it's a very interesting, productive question, even if it's not perhaps the right question to be asking. And I'm going to come to that. But I think it's an interesting journey. It's an interesting question to reflect on. So we're going to talk about what does make a good clown, or how can you know that you're doing a good job as a clown? And I put "as a clown" in parentheses because it's a question I ask myself all the time anyway about life. How do I know I'm doing a good job? About all kinds of things, as a parent, as a coach, as a business owner, as a friend, as a colleague. How do I know I'm doing a good job as a human? Is it a useful question? Why do I keep asking myself this question? And is there a good answer to it? My hunch is that if I can answer this question or get some insight around this question in relation to clowning, maybe it will give me a clue about how to relate to that question in the rest of my life. We often find, I think, that clowning can help us out in this way, can give us tips and pointers in relation to how we live our lives in general, beyond clowning. So let's jump in. How do I know I'm doing a good job as a clown when I'm out there performing in front of an audience, or maybe when I'm reflecting on a performance that I've just done? What are the measures of success? And who gets to decide? Is it something that I can decide internally based on some kind of feeling, impulse, instinct? Is it based on, did I get through my script? Did I do all the things that I had planned to do? Or do I need some kind of external measure? For example, did the audience laugh? Did they visibly display some kind of enthusiasm? Clapping? Did they come up to me afterwards and tell me they liked it? Did they come back for more? Did they buy a ticket? These are all external signs of success. They could validate us and tell us, yes, I'm doing a good job as a clown. And on one level, yes, I'd be right. If the world is approving of me, they're going to demonstrate that in certain measurable ways. But on the other hand, as an artist, I would say, isn't it important that we have our own internal sense of what's right and wrong, what's good and bad, what's the indication of success, something that's not dependent on external validation. As an artist, we never want to become too dependent on external approval. There's this risk that we just become employees of our audience, manipulated by their wants and their desires, instead of following our true path. As artists, we want to at least think that we have this potential to act creatively, autonomously, free, outside the regular rules and conventions and expectations of society. If not, what's the point? Or perhaps to take that thought even further, as artists, we want to feel that we're accessing some other level of influence or inspiration. We are moved by the spirit, by the muse. We're achieving some higher plane, and we're channeling the energy of the universe in our artistic work. Perhaps if we're doing that, if we are aware that we're doing that, it's a sign of success, whether or not people like it. Many artists have had this position. It doesn't matter if people like it or not. I'm called to express this particular thing, this particular idea, and I have to be true to that. That's what it means to be an artist. I think clowns are in a difficult bind in relation to this question, because we are artists. We demand maybe some level of autonomy and independence. But clowns, more than almost any other kind of artist, are of the people. We are intimately connected to our audience. And the impact that we have on that audience seems indispensable. So let's reflect on this question as it pertains to life beyond clowning. That we have the same dilemma, that we feel the same tension between following our own path, our true path, versus doing things for other people, seeking external validation. I sense that this tension has become more extreme, more entrenched in recent years. I'm not sure if that historical trend is real or I can justify that, but that's my sense. And I'll explain why. Capitalism, of course, encourages us to evaluate our work and our output on the basis of a monetary value, of an economic value. We're paid a certain amount to do a certain thing, and society pays us more for certain kinds of work than for other kinds of work. And it's hard to escape that. Maybe that's why that phrase even exists, doing a good job. Whatever we're talking about, not necessarily work, but we use that phrase, am I doing a good job? I did a good job. Because we're used to thinking about everything as a job, as work, and jobs have traditionally been valued and rated in monetary ways. That's in the last several hundred or even 1,000 years. But much more recently, we've invented a more subtle form of mental imprisonment of this kind, which is social media and the internet, where we are constantly, those of us who engage in that, we are constantly surfing this problem or this tension between being true to ourselves, expressing ourselves, and playing to the crowd, wanting more likes, wanting people to read our posts, to share them, to approve of them. And as much as we play that game or say that we're just playing a game, for me at least, there is an emotional dependency there, a codependency. I find that I am happier, that it gives me an emotional uplift when I feel that people out there are enjoying my content, that they're validating my reason for being. So in this tension between external versus internal validation, the external has definitely ramped up in the last few decades. But I would say that the internal validation has also become more intense, more extreme, maybe in response, or maybe each has spurred on the other to a more and more polarized degree. Because this rhetoric of speaking my truth, walking my true path, stepping into my higher self, being true to myself, being authentic, this kind of language is relatively recent, and it's extremely dominant today, I would say, in many cultural and social circles. It's almost a norm. We must feel within ourselves, or maybe be seen to play an authenticity, to be authentic, to be walking our true path, to be unaffected, to be free, independent, not trapped by external validation or social convention. So we have tension pulling in both directions. We have many signs and signals in the world telling us that external validation is important. And we also have this pressure towards the internal, the autonomous, as the primary motivating and validating factor. I hope this isn't all getting too heady and intellectual, and that this kind of makes sense in a real way for you in your life. Do you feel this? Do you feel the tension between wanting to please others, wanting to be seen, to be good on the one hand, and on the other hand, feeling that it's important to be authentic to myself, to follow my true path? So whether we're a clown, an artist, or not, just in everyday life, this question, how do I know I'm doing a good job, is very poignant. Pushes buttons for many of us, I would say. How do we know? It's really hard to know. It's not simple. I want to address this question, or perhaps to come at it from some different angles, and 3 different angles in particular. And I hope that by coming at it from these 3 different angles, I hope that we may be able to find a new and more healthy relationship to this question of how do I know I'm doing a good job? Maybe when you finish listening to this podcast, you can tell me if what I said made sense, was effective, was useful for you. Did I do a good job? Clearly, external validation is important to me. So the first way I want to think about the question is in relation to games and the way that games and play allow for a kind of learning to occur. Now, there's a lot of theory around games and play, anthropological, psychoanalytical theory, and one of the most predominant ways of seeing play and games is that we do it very naturally. Other animals do it also. We do it as a way of learning, as a way of experimenting, iterating, trying out new things in a safe environment. And key to that is feedback loops. Games must have feedback loops, something that tells us how we're doing, a system of points, winning and losing, or of lives lost. We need to know how well we're doing so that we can improve. If we fail, we understand we failed. It's data that can help us to try something different, to change the direction of travel. And when we feel that we're doing better, we understand why and how, and we can continue to move in that direction. That's how learning occurs, how improvement occurs through this structure of games and play, through repetition, failure, and feedback. So on one level, the question of how do I know I'm doing a good job is a really natural thing to ask. Maybe it's genetically inbuilt. We're designed to be asking this question constantly, whether it's on a conscious or unconscious level, to evaluate our own effectiveness, the efficiency of our actions, trying to figure out, am I doing a good job? So for clowning, we can iteratively learn how to do a better job of clowning by playing the game of clowning. And I would say most of the time that needs to be in front of an audience, right? That's where the game really occurs, where we get the feedback loop. We can see the effect we're having. But in order for that feedback loop to be meaningful, we need to understand what we're aiming for. What is our intention, our goal? What gives us positive points? What allows us to win? So we can set goals for ourselves. We can say, I want this or that to happen. I want to earn this amount of money, or to get this size of audience, or for the audience to laugh this much, or for me to be successful in a particular kind of acknowledged, validated way. And then the feedback loop will tell us very boldly whether we're being successful in that or not. Once we have that feedback loop in place, about our measures of what success looks like, we can tell, am I doing a good job? Am I creating the impact that I want to have here? Entertainers, clowns, comedians of different kinds since forever have been in that game, tied to measurable outputs in order to make a living. Because if people didn't enjoy it, we wouldn't earn money. We wouldn't be able to make a living. People wouldn't come back. You could say we wouldn't be doing a good job. Maybe we wouldn't even have a job. So that's the first perspective, the idea of doing a better job by learning, improving through a kind of game-oriented approach. The second idea is the idea of clowning as a transaction. This comes from communication theory. You might say that the reason that we communicate or talk in the first place is because we want something. We want a transaction to take place. If we didn't want something or need something from the outside world, there'd be no compulsion to communicate, no need. From when we're newborns, we're communicating in order to express a need for survival, for something we need, food, love, connection, whatever it is. We're putting something out into the world in order to get something back. We learn to make a particular face or cry in a particular way that leads to getting that love or food from our parents. And it continues from there as we get older in just more sophisticated ways. And you could say that when we're clowning, we're just doing the same thing. We're putting something out into the world. And we want a transaction to take place. We want something back from that. That's the goal. This is different from the learning model that I started with, because it's not just about getting better at something by an external measure. It's about what I want, and am I getting that? So when we give them a gift, when we give the audience a gift of a joke, a routine, a performance, or a character, we do that in exchange for something that we want. Maybe that's money, or maybe it's the gift of laughter that makes us feel good. So to answer the question of whether I'm doing a good job by this measure, we need to understand what we want out of this transaction, and are we getting that thing? In fact, are both sides in the transaction receiving what they want? People have come here to see, to laugh, to be enlivened in a particular way, to be delighted, and if I give them that, they give me something in return. It's an act of exchange. However, there's a third perspective, a third way I'd like to look at this question. And this one, I think, breaks the mold somewhat. Here I go back to my clown training and something that Sue Morrison, my original first and foremost clown teacher, said to me, and says frequently, that clown isn't me and it isn't you. It's in the we. It's in that space where the two circles meet, in that overlap. The way I see this is that clowning is a phenomenon. It's an experience of shared humanity. It's not a transaction or a process even, or a space of learning. It's a transcendent moment in which we get to participate, in which the performer and the audience are able to simultaneously experience shared humanity. And the sign that this is happening is that there's a feeling of natural, spontaneous flow, of transformation, of transcendence. The question, how do I know I'm doing a good job? This is blown out of the water by this way of thinking of clowning. Because if we think of clowning as this spontaneous moment of togetherness and connectedness, the we, it's not an agential act. It's not something I choose to do. It's not a job at all. And I couldn't do a good or bad job if I wanted to. It's something that happens to me. And it's interesting to think about it that way, because again, we're so often encouraged to be the ones in control. And clowning requires us to let go, to surrender control, to give up to this sort of external force or energy. It takes us. Sue talks about the gods, the clown gods, letting them in and letting them take us on a ride. If we think about it that way, then the question becomes irrelevant. Am I doing a good job? Are the clown gods doing a good job? Of course. They can't not do a good job because they're the clown gods. They're just doing clowning. And if we get out of the way and let them in, let them take us on a ride, that's all we need to do, in fact. So the question of good or bad or evaluating becomes moot. It becomes actually unhelpful because it brings back the I, the ego. Am I doing a good job? It turns clowning into an action, an act that I'm doing to somebody else or for somebody else. I don't want to invalidate any of these three ways of thinking about the question. I think they're all actually valid. Maybe they seem mutually exclusive, but I don't think they are. Clowning takes us into all of these three realms, these levels, and that's why it's so powerful. It takes us into the level of learning, where we get to iterate, get feedback, grow as clowns and as human beings. It takes us into the level of exchange and communication, where we can see more clearly what the other needs and give them that and receive something in return. And when we truly let it, clowning takes us into this transcendent realm where we are no longer in control. We don't need to even ask ourselves, am I doing a good job? Because if we're clowning, that's the whole truth. We are simply clowning. Let's just flip this for a moment and ask the question, when we fail, who do we hold responsible? And there's two traps here. If we feel that we've failed, if we've done a bad job, sometimes we can blame the audience. It wasn't a good audience. They didn't get it. What's wrong with them? Or the context. The lighting was bad, or there was loud music in the next room, or everyone was tired because of such and such. But we can also fall into the trap of taking the blame ourselves and feeling entirely responsible for that lack of success. I wasn't on form tonight. I messed up. My mind was elsewhere. I hadn't rehearsed enough. I say these are two traps because they're both equally untrue, especially if we think about the third level, the transcendent. Clowning, in this way of thinking, is a co-creation, a collective phenomenon that connects us with each other, but also with these higher energies, these spiritual energies over which we have very little control and very little knowledge because they're not things you can know about. The language of doing a good job or doing a bad job isn't relevant in this realm. These are human concepts, and they don't pertain in those contexts of the sacred or the spiritual. If the question, am I doing a good job, isn't a helpful or relevant question, what might be some more useful, powerful, resourceful questions that we could ask ourselves? What is the adventure that the clown gods are going to take me on today? How can I best get out of the way and let them do their job? What wonderful, fabulous possibilities are right out there in front of me in this moment? Clowning requires complicity, trust, surrender. Doing these things isn't a job, and we can't produce them as a kind of work or force them on other people. That's why really anybody can clown at any moment, however much experience or lack of experience you might have. And that brings me full circle back to the curious person who asked me the question in the first place. That person is not a complete beginner, but they are pretty early on in their clown journey and are doubting, feeling anxiety and confusion over, are they doing a good job? Do they have the right to call themselves a clown? And my response after all of that digression is really this. You don't have to do a good job to be a clown. You just have to say yes. Step over the edge of the cliff. Invite those clown gods in. Let them take the reins. Take the steering wheel. The very first time you ever put on a red nose or attend a clown workshop, you can be a fabulous clown. Because all it takes is saying yes, getting out of the way, and letting that clown energy steer the ship. The question whether I'm a clown or not is not a truth or a truism that attaches to a person and then is always true. If I'm a clown now, that means I'm a clown forever. It's only true in that particular moment. Am I clowning right now? That's why I like the word clowning over the word clown, although I use both words. But it reminds us that clowning is a kind of space, a kind of being, a kind of experience of human interaction with the world. Whereas the word clown implies a fixed thing that you have to work hard at to become. Am I doing a good job? Am I a clown? How do I know I'm doing a good job? If we think about clowning, rather, then we can simply ask ourselves, is there clowning present in this moment? And it's a simple answer, yes or no. And if it's a no, we always have the power to flip that switch and to let the clowning begin. Even the most experienced clowns who've been doing it for decades can find themselves in front of an audience not really clowning, even though we might call them a clown. In this way, we are all beginners. We are all learning. We are all inexperienced. We're all somewhat ignorant. What I say to that person who asked me this great provocative question is, step over the edge of the cliff. Surrender. Let the clowning begin. I think it's pretty obvious, at least I hope it is, how this translates into everyday life beyond the clowning. I mentioned at the beginning that I often use clowning as a way to answer bigger questions. Am I doing a good job in my life, in my day-to-day work, relationships, and so on? What would happen if we took the same approach to that question that I just laid out in relation to clowning? If instead of thinking about learning and evaluating or needing something in exchange for something else that I'm giving, instead of all of that, we thought about the possibility that life isn't a given, isn't a thing that we have to get good at in a finite kind of way, but rather it's a space of being, of infinite possibility. And that when we are truly present and in the moment and connected with those energies of the universe and other beings all around us, human and non-human, we can transcend those kinds of evaluative self-reflections of good and bad, better and worse, success and failure. And instead we can just step into this infinite sense of being. That's at least what I aspire to. And of course, I don't always manage that. So often I'm worried about what people think, or how I feel I'm doing against the scale, some kind of value judgments that I'm placing on myself or having placed on me. And all of that is just part of life. Of course, we can't avoid it entirely. But I also know that in those moments when I just step over the edge of the cliff and let myself be carried, be guided by some force of the universe that's bigger than me, and I just flow with that and I say yes to it, those are the moments when really I am most happy, most satisfied, most awake. So thank you, clowning, for teaching me yet again something about how to live my life more fully, more beautifully, more consciously. I hope you enjoyed today's rambling episode. Please do tell me in the comments below, did I do a good job? And of course, we'd love to have you as a subscriber so that you don't miss a single episode. Share it with your friends. Help us to unleash as many clowns as possible into the world, because we sure need it right now. Thank you for being a loyal listener. And please, as always, keep clowning.